All right, so we know a few more definitions. We know about collinear. We already know what a line segment is. We know what a line is. So now we're going to actually have some fun with the compass and see what we can do with it. There's three things we're going to do. We're going to, first of all, copy a line segment. We're going to be able to add line segments together. And then we're also going to be able to find the midpoint of line segments. So the first thing we're going to start with is copying a line segment. So to copy a line segment. So copy a line segment. Now, how do you copy a line segment? So let me actually draw a line segment that we can copy. I'll do something easy. Let's just say, I don't know, how about 2 inches? Or 1.5. We'll do 1.5. 2 inches seems a little bit long. All right, so a line segment has 2 endpoints, and we'll call them A and B. So now for the assignment, what I want you to do is use your compass to create a new line segment that's an exact replica of the original. So basically, I want to copy this. So in order to copy, you're going to take your compass. We have the pointy end, and I'm going to put the pointy end at one of the endpoints. And I'm going to open my compass up. I'm going to open it until the lead touches the other endpoint. So notice that the sharp end is at one endpoint, the lead is at the other endpoint. So I have my compass, it's adjusted exactly where it's going to be. Now I'm not going to change my compass at all. I'm going to leave it exactly the way it is. I'm going to be very careful not to mess with it. And I'm going to draw another endpoint. Now taking my compass that I have not adjusted, I have not changed it. On my compass, I don't change this compass unless you see me dialing this little threaded piece right here. Once you see me spinning this thing, that means I'm adjusting it, but I'm not adjusting it yet. Because notice, see, it still has the same width, okay? It's opened up the same way. You want to keep it that way. So now I'm going to put the pointy end at my end point, and I'm going to make what we call an arc. This right here is called an arc. So on your assignment, when you copy these things, I need to see that arc on your paper. That way I know that you used a compass and you didn't just use a ruler. Okay, the arc is very important. So make sure that you show all the arcs that you make. That's where the grade comes from. It comes from the arcs. That's what I look at. All right, so I got my endpoint. Now, in order to make a replica, all I got to do is just connect the endpoint with any point along the arc. Any point. I'm just going to choose this one. All right. And it looks like we're at about 1.5 inches, just like we were on this one. So these two are identical. And you could call it something else. I could call this A prime, B prime. Whatever floats your boat. So that's how you make a copy of a line segment. Pretty easy. Pretty easy. Now let's talk about adding line segments. That's another thing we can do. We can add line segments. So adding line segments. So now I need to have 2 different line segments. Okay, so we can do that. So I could do, let's see, I could have 1 inch. And I could have, I don't know, well, let's do 1.5 inches. I could have 1.5 inches. All right, so these are my 2 line segments. I'm going to put my endpoints. All right, so now we have 2 line segments. And I want to add them together. I want to create one line segment that is the sum of these 2. So remember, think back. We are basically going back to that segment addition postulate. The segment addition postulate, or axiom, it says that if I take A and B, then I add segment B and C to that, my resulting line segment will be AC. That's the segment addition postulate. So what we're doing right now is actually showing how that works. We're showing how that obvious axiom, that axiom that requires no proof, we're showing how that works. So if I'm going to copy a line segment, the first thing I want to do, if I'm going to add two line segments, the first thing I do is copy one of them. So I'm just going to copy the top one. So remember, to copy a line segment, so I'm going to have to adjust my compass. And I'm going to move this camera just a little bit so you can get kind of a better view. So I'm going to have to adjust my compass. I need to make it a little smaller because right now it's a little too big. So I'm adjusting it, and it should. Make sure you can see this. All right, so the pointy end is over here. The leaded end is over here. All right, good. So let's go ahead and copy this first. I'm going to make my arc. And I should have made a mark before, but I can see the little indentation in the paper. There we go. So that's my endpoint. Let's just make sure that's right. Yep, that's right. All right, so I've copied it. I make my endpoint, then I make the arc, and then I'm going to make the actual segment. And it's kind of random where you want to go. I could have stopped it here, so I could have made a line go this direction. I could have made it go this direction. It really doesn't matter. All right, so that's my line, my first line. Now I need to add this line segment to that. So we're basically going to do the same thing. We start out doing the exact same thing. I'm going to adjust my compass. So this line is bigger than this line segment over here. So I need to open my compass up a bit. So let's open it up a bit. All right, now let's see if we can fine tune it a little. All right, so just so you can see this. All right, so that's about right. All right, so notice the pointy end is at one endpoint, leaded end is at the other endpoint. So I'm not adjusting it. I'm not going to change it. I'm going to keep it the way it is. And now I'm going to put my little needle here. And I'm going to create another arc. So now I have two arcs. So we have two arcs. This is the difference. Before, when I copied a line segment, it didn't matter which direction it was going. But because I want these to be collinear, that means along the same line, it does matter what direction. But fortunately, I have a line here that allows me to see what direction I need to go. So I'm going to take my straight edge, follow this line, and then I'm going to draw it out even more until I hit the end of the arc. All right, so now I have my line segment. And you can call this A and B. We can call this B and C. So first, what we did, we copied AB. So that's A, that's B. We copied that down. Then the next thing we did was copy down B and C right next to it, but along the same direction. So this other segment is BC. Now my total line segment is AC. So what I suggest you do is use your compass and practice with this. And if you have a ruler, what you can do is actually verify your result. Make sure you do get something that equals AB plus BC. So that's how you add a line segments together. So adding line segments together. So one more thing to go over on these little constructions. That is finding a midpoint. Finding a midpoint. So a few weeks ago, I was looking through the book, and they had an interesting method for finding the midpoint. They said, take a sheet of paper and fold it in half and line up the dots. But you know what? In the real world, that doesn't really work. We're not going to do it that way. Finding a midpoint. Oh, I wished I had it with me, but like the last set of plans that I drew up was for it was an old German battleship. But these plans, they were about 9 feet long, 4 feet wide. So the sheet of paper was 9 feet long and 4 feet wide. Now imagine having to find midpoints by taking that huge sheet of paper and lining up dots, because they're saying this. Take two dots and line up the dots, try and find the dots, increase it. I mean, that just doesn't work. I mean, that's a little silly. But fortunately, we have a straight edge and we have a compass, so we don't have to go through all that. So let me show you how to find a midpoint without folding your paper. So let's start with a line segment. So I'm going to start with the line segment. We'll do what we did before. We'll make it 2 inches. Let's make it 2 inches. We had 1.5, but we'll make it 2 this time. All right, so I have a 2-inch line segment, and I'll just continue to call it AB. Now, suppose I want to find the midpoint. The point, it's right in the middle of A and B. That's the midpoint. It's right in the middle. So let me show you how to do this. I'm going to open my compass up. Now, this part, you can take a little bit of liberty as to how far you open the compass up. Once you see all the steps, you'll have an idea of how far to open it. So I open it about this far. So let me make sure you can see that. So it's open about this far. So I'm going to make a big arc. Try and make a big arc like this. So, and again, this was arbitrary. I mean, really, ideally, you have to open it up so that it's further out than the midpoint. I know the midpoint is somewhere around here where my fingertip is. So I need to open it up so that it's a little bit further than the midpoint. And I'm going to do the same thing at the other end point, B. So B. And notice I did not adjust my compass. All right. I adjusted my compass to make this arc. So I made this arc with my compass. But once I make my arc, I'm not going to adjust it. I'm going to leave it exactly the same. Okay, I'm not going to mess with it. I'm going to keep it exactly the same. I'm going to come over to B, and I'm going to make another arc. So now I have 2 arcs. And at first it doesn't look like there's a midpoint there. Now, just intuitively, I can see that the midpoint has to be in here somewhere, right? But here's what we can do. Take a straight edge. Look at where these arcs intersect. They intersect at a point here and a point here. So now let's put the straight edge along those points. I can use dotted lines. Where that dotted line crosses our segment, that's where the midpoint is. I'll just call it midpoint M. M is right there. So just to recap, you're going to open your compass so that it's a little bigger than the midpoint. All right, so the compass is going to overlap the midpoint. Then without adjusting it, leaving it the same, you're not messing with it. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to make another arc. So make another arc. And then wherever those arcs intersect, that tells you where to put your straight edge. And your straight edge is going to show you exactly where the midpoint is. And so let's just verify it here. I think I said 2 inches. It's about 2 inches. And look at that. I don't know if you can see this or not, but it lines up right at the 1. So this is a perfect midpoint. So in a word of advice for these things, when you're doing your compass, make sure that your compass doesn't move very much. Right? The more your compass moves around, the less precise you're going to get. Once you adjust your compass, like here, I adjusted my compass to make this initial arc. After that, I had to keep the compass the same. Try not to let your compass move too much if you need to keep it the same. With some compasses, that's a little difficult. For others, it's a lot easier. Like this one is pretty good. The ones that have the threads, these are really good. Like this compass basically has no play. I can't, I can squeeze it all I want. It's not going to go anywhere. Other compasses are a little different. So you might have to practice a little bit. If your compass isn't quite as solid, you might have to practice and have like a soft touch. So that's finding the midpoint. And one other thing you need to write is this little definition. This dashed line that I just drew, this is called a segment bisector. This is a segment bisector. Whenever you see the word bisect or bisector, just think about something that's going in the middle. For example, there's angle bisectors. Angle bisectors is a segment that's right in the middle of an angle. So bisect, I need you to think about in the middle. That's what bisect means. All right, so next question is, we can find a midpoint using a straight edge and a compass. That's great and all. But what about a coordinate plane? Suppose I give you two coordinates and then I ask you to find the midpoint. So that's what we're going to do next.